Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here, and welcome to the Canon EOS C200 and C200B video training series. We are at Canon's Burbank facility. We're in the prep bay right now, and this video is setting up for shooting part 2. We're going to be talking about things like time code. We're going to be talking about assignable buttons. We're going to talk about how to save your camera settings to the camera and to SD cards. We're going to talk about the control dial, and we're also going to be talking about the My Menu feature in the camera. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about are assignable buttons, and there are a lot of them. There are 11 on the camera body itself. There are 2 on the monitor unit. The camera grip button, there is 1 assignable button there. And then there are other devices that you can attach to this camera where there are assignable buttons as well. So what I want to do is talk about how we can assign them. But before I do that, I do want to say that there's a logic to where these buttons are on the C200 and the C200B. They are placed there so that we can get to those features easily. And there's some muscle memory there as well, so that when we are shooting with the camera, especially as a one-man crew, that it is easy to get to those functions just in terms of remembering where they are on the camera body. But let's go ahead and assign a couple of these buttons to different functions and see how we do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into the menu of the camera system, and we are in the Assignable Buttons menu. And there are 5 submenus under here, and I do want to show you what those are. So when I go down here into the submenus, menus 1 and 2 are to assign the 11 buttons on the camera body itself. Menu 3 is where we are assigning the camera grip button. There is 1 assignable button there. Menu 4 is specific to the LMV1 here, so the LCD unit, and there are assignable buttons there, 1 and 2, that we can have and assign to. And then there are 2 other menus in here. One is specific to the EVF V70, and when you take this electronic viewfinder, which you can buy separately and you can use it with the C200, there are 2 assignable buttons on this side of the EVF, there are 2 on the other, and we can actually assign those when this is attached to the camera system. And then the 6th menu under assignable buttons is specific to the RCV100, the remote control unit, and there are assignable buttons on there. There are 4 in total, and you can assign them from the camera system when you're using that with the C200 and the C200B. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and back up to the first menu here under assignable buttons. And what we're going to do for this example is we're going to take assignable button number 3, which is the zebra function, which is not something that I use very often with the camera system. I primarily use the waveform monitor. And I'm going to go ahead and go down to zebra, and I'm going to assign that button to a different job. So assignable button number 3, and I'm going to go in here and scroll down, and I'm going to choose this option, which I really like in the camera system, and it is called status. And I'm going to choose status for assignable button number 3. I'm just going to go ahead and back out of that, and then if I press assignable button number 3 here, it's going to bring up these status screens that I can scroll through just using my joystick here. And you can see it's all of the key information about how the camera is set up right now. So I can quickly and easily see what my settings are. And when somebody is ACing on these camera systems and they want to make sure that their settings are correct, or you're just a single operator, it makes it very quick for you to go through and see if there's something that's not matching, let's say between 2 camera systems, or even just see what is not set correctly on your camera system. So that's one way to choose what you want the assignable buttons to do. I'm going to show you another way right now. I love to have the ability to turn LUTs on and off, lookup tables, and I want to be able to get to that quickly and easily without digging into a menu system. So in order to do that, we have to turn the LUT on first in the camera. So that's very, very important. So I'm going to go back to my menu, and I'm going to go over to my custom picture HDR menu. And inside of that menu, I'm going to go into HDR LUT. So this gives me the ability to choose where I want to push a LUT depending on what is plugged in and how I have the camera set up. So I want to assign a LUT to the video signal. The video signal is what comes out of the video terminal, which is what this monitor unit is plugged into. So I'm going to go into video. I am going to then choose a BT709 LUT, so just a Rec 709 LUT. And then once I've chosen that, and I'm just going to back out of here, I'm going to show you how to assign a button really easily. You hold down the menu button and whatever assignable button you want to assign. And in my case, usually if I want to get to the function button, I will use the function button here on the monitor unit. So I'm going to reassign assignable button number 8 on the camera body. I'm going to hold down menu and then that assignable button, and it's immediately going to go into assignable buttons for button number 8. And then I'm going to, in this case, scroll up, and I'm going to find my LUT options, and I'm going to choose that global LUT option. You can see there are other options in terms of turning on and off LUTs to specific places, and that's now been assigned. I'm going to step out of there, and when I press assignable button 8, it will turn on and off my BT709 LUT. So those are the assignable buttons, and I'm going to step out of there, and we're now going to take a look at the system setup menu. And under the first system setup menu, what I want to talk to you about before we go into anything else is what's called the transfer menu custom picture option. So transfer menu / CP or custom picture is where we save our camera settings to either, on this camera, the camera itself, or to an SD card that is in SD card slot B. So I'm going to say, let me overwrite the save data on here, and that has now been saved to the camera. I'm going to step out of the menu. I can see that right now I am in Canon Log 3. And what I'm going to do is go into my menu system, and I'm going to change my gamma curve to YDR. I'm going to step out of that. We can see that the camera now reads YDR. And I'm going to go back to my camera setup menu. And under transfer menu, I am now going to choose load. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the settings from the camera. Here, I'm going to overwrite the settings. It's essentially going to reboot the camera system right now. And it's going to take any of those saved settings and apply them and put them into the camera system. And this is great when you're a single operator because you can always have a stored version of your favorite way that the camera is set up. And you'll see that now it switched it back to Canon Log 3 in terms of my gamma curve. So really fantastic. If you want to record to an SD card, just put an SD card into the camera system and you can save it to that. So if we go into the second menu here, we have HDMI max resolution, which we can set to 1920 by 1080 or 3840 by 2160. And we also have for our SDI output either 1920 by 1080, or we can do a DCI 2K. This would be for your RAW signal. This is for when you have the camera set up for Cinema Raw light recording. And if you were in full HD, it would output a 1920 by 1080. So a lot of this has to do with how your camera is set up when you are outputting over SDI and also the HDMI terminals. And that has a lot to do with your resolution that you're recording in and also the frame rates that you're recording in. And that will determine what the bit depth and also the color sampling is that's being pushed out of those terminals, as you can see here. And then we'll go into the next menu and we'll talk briefly about timecode. Now there's basically two ways that you can set up a camera in terms of recording timecode. So record run timecode is basically start stop timecode. So let's say our camera is set to 0 on hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. We start recording and we record for 1 minute and 30 seconds and 12 frames. We press stop. The next time we press record, it will start at 1 minute and 30 seconds and 13 frames, and then we'll stop, and then it'll continue to do that, start, stop, timecode. The second type of timecode, which is the type of timecode that a lot of us use in production, is free run timecode. And this is continuous timecode in terms of how it's running. So you can see as soon as I select that, it's actually starting because the camera was set to 0, and it's just continuing to record consecutively. A timecode stamp that will be metadata on your files. But that's not very useful when we're using a camera system, because what is that 0 referring to? So usually when we are recording in free run, we're doing free run time code, what we call time of day. So what I'll do is under free run there, I have it set, and then I'm going to go to set time code, and then I will say change. And then what I'm going to do is set my hours. This is based on a 24-hour clock. So right now it is 4:30. So I'm going to go to 16:30 for that, and then I'm just going to take a look at my clock here. It's actually 4:31 and 30 seconds. So I'm actually going to set that to 45 seconds, or 40, let's just say. And I'm going to go to set, and there it is. So now we have time of day. I want to talk to you about this right here, which is this control dial, and I also want to talk to you about the dial that is over here on the grip unit. So those two dials can be assigned functionality. So the first one we'll do is we'll do the camera control dial. And I'm just going to go ahead and select that. By default, that is set to change the iris on your lens. So this dial here will change the iris. So if I step out of here and I turn that dial, you'll see that it is changing the iris of my lens. But if I go into my menu and I select that, I can also assign that to ISO/gain. So if I choose ISO/gain and I step out of this, you'll see that I am now changing my ISO with that control dial. So that gives you quick and easy access to either changes to ISO or to iris with that control dial. So let's just go ahead and set that back to 800. I'm also going to go back into the menu and set that to iris, because that's generally the way I have it set up. And then over here we have the dial that's on the grip unit itself. So that's this dial. If I want to, I can assign that to a different job as well under the menu, and I'll go to camera grip control dial, and I can choose whether or not that's assigned to ISO or it's assigned to the iris. So I could change that. That way we have, with these two control dials, the ability for one to be assigned to ISO gain and one to be assigned to iris, which I think is fantastic. So let's go ahead and see what else we have in these menus here. We're going to go over to our next menu here, and this is the last menu that I'm going to talk about in this particular video. It's called My Menu. And this is going to give you the ability to customize how you want to set up your C200 or your C200B. And the way you do it is you register particular features here. So I'm going to choose Edit, and I'm going to go into Register. And what you do is you cycle through the camera system as if you were navigating the menu system itself. And then you choose something that you want to access on a regular basis. So for instance, let's say I wanted to get to my gamma curves and what those settings were quickly. I could go down here to gamma. I would register gamma and add that. And then you will see that gamma is now in my menu. I can go in here and add additional items to that menu. So I'll register something else. We're going to go up here and I'm going to go into initialize media. And I will add that in terms of my CFast cards. And I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to register that for SD card A, complete. So it'll do a complete initialization. I will also add here SD card B, and I'll add that to my menu. So you can just continue to add to your My Menu. And what's really cool about this is there's actually 5 different My Menus. So depending on who the user is, or depending on the types of shoots that you're doing, you can add additional menu items to each of those 5 different My Menus, or we call it Camera 1, Camera 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's setting up for shooting, part 2. Thanks for watching.